Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a really nice bank holiday weekend and you're all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed again. My name is Kieran Duna. I'm the branch chair here, and I am absolutely delighted to have Jim Perry with us today. Jim is a senior consultant and authorizing engineer for the Water Hygiene Centre, and he's kindly giving up his time today to educate us all on Legionella and all things related to water pathogens. So we're very, very grateful for Jim to come along, who's going to give a much better introduction of himself, better than me. So everybody, please enjoy the presentation. We will invite questions at the end, or you can put them in the chat throughout, and we will deal with them at the end. So over to you, Jim. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Kieran. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, welcome to the presentation. I'm Jim Perry, Senior Consultant Authorising Engineer Water for Water Hygiene Centre. I've been in the water industry now for around 30 years. Started off life as a microbiologist, food, water and environmental soils. Moved through my career to plumber and then the last 10 years as a consultant, authorised engineer. So I've got a lot of knowledge around water systems, not only from the ecological, microbiological backgrounds, but also from how installations work. So today's presentation's called The Chain of Infection, which is a reservoir of organisms. So within the title, trying to identify who is part of the chain and what the reservoir of organisms might be. We're all familiar with TBCs, Legionella, Pseudomonas aeruginosa. There are also other waterborne pathogens which become of more interest and clinical concern. So these can be things like Cupovardis particulus, which has been identified recently, potentially in the Glasgow incident. So let's carry on with the presentation. So the chain of infection. So the HAI of chain, we've got healthcare associated infection or hospital acquired infection. Okay, these are chains of infections. Interchangeable term for a non-cosomal infection. Okay, so we're looking at the HAI as from a healthcare or a hospital infection perspective. So, prevention of hospital-acquired infections. We've got the World Health Organization documentation. The title being the chain of infection of reservoir organisms. It's worthy to note the WHO details that almost 2 billion people depend on healthcare facilities with no water. So worldwide, 1 in 4 healthcare facilities has no water services. 1 in 3 does not have any access to hand hygiene where care is provided. 1 in 10 has no sanitation services. And 1 in 3 does not segregate waste safely. In the world's 47 least deprived countries, 1 in 2 healthcare facilities have no basic water services, so that's basic drinking water. 1 in 4 healthcare facilities has no hygiene facilities at points of care, and 3 in 5 lack basic sanitation services. So, with this in mind, what is an infection? So, a non-zoonotic infection, also called hospital-acquired infection, can be defined as an infection acquired in a hospital by a patient who has been admitted for a reason other than an infection, or that particular infection. An infection occurring in the patient in a hospital or other healthcare facility whom the infection was not present on incubating at the time of admission, so when the patient arrived into the facility. This includes infections acquired in the hospital but appearing after discharge, and also occupational infections among staff at the facility. So quite an interesting set of stats there. So the WHO 2016 issued guidelines on core components of infection prevention and control programs at the national acute healthcare facility level. In the report, it states Healthcare associated infections are one of the most common and adverse events in care and delivery and are an endemic burden coupled with epidemics, i.e. things like coronavirus, are major public health concerns and problems. Sticking with the HAI, how much of a problem are they? In May 2011, the World Health Organization issued a report called the Report on Burden of Endemic Healthcare Associated Infection Worldwide, which summarised in the fact sheets in these being. So, on every 100 hospitalised patients at any given time, 7 in developed and 10 in developing countries will acquire at least one HAI. At any given time, the prevalence of the HAI in developed and developing countries varies between 3.5% and 12%. The European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control estimates that 4.131 million patients were affected by HIOs every year. So approximately 30% of these patients are in ICUs and affected by at least one episode of a HAI. The longer the patient stops in ICU, the more at risk they are at getting an infection. And high frequency of infections is associated with the use of invasive devices, particularly central lines, urinary catheters, and ventilators. So, for an infection to occur, there needs to be presence of microorganisms, immunocompromised patients, and transmission. So we've got 3 parts of a chain. Over the next few slides, we're going to look at each one of these contributing factors. Starting with immune-compromised patients. It's fair to say we know a little about types of patients and their susceptibility. So, healthy people may develop Legionnaire's disease. There are several increases of susceptibility. I'm sure we've all got some experience with Legionella. It's been around for over 40 years, probably getting close to 50 now. And guidance on management has been around for nearly that long. So thinking about Legionella, what do we know? So we had the Barrow outbreak in 2002. The ratio of 7:1 female to male contraction weight has been debunked, saying that men are more likely than women to contract the disease. As I say, this was more of a 7:1, where more females than males in this case actually contracted more of the bacteria. We're looking at newborns, newborn babies, neonates, people increasing in age, so those greater than 50, men who I've just mentioned, existing respiratory disease that makes lungs more vulnerable to illnesses, illnesses and underlying health conditions, i.e. cancer, diabetes, kidney dialysis, alcoholism, smoking, heavy cigarette smoking has probability of impaired lung functions, and patients who are immune compromised as a result of an illness or treatment, i.e. those on immunosuppressant drugs, which inhibit the body's natural defenses against infection. So let's go back to the stats around the males against females. With males, there's no physiological reason. It's just a 3:1 ratio from history. Due to exposure via historical data from 1976 onwards, which identified the possibility of the work type where high-risk appliances were found where males were working. And females have a 0.4% greater immune system than a male. This was from a white paper written in the States. It does not give this 3:1 ratio. So it's a bit of an anomaly around the males against females for the immune compromised persons. So there was data from Public Health England showing that relationship between people who caught Legionnaire's disease and underlying conditions had Let's have a look at the data. Looking at underlying conditions, 2 out of 3 people caught Legionnaires' disease had something wrong with them. So 33% were smokers, 29% had not heart conditions, and 15% had diabetes. In 2012, there was an outbreak of Legionnaires' disease in Edinburgh, where there was 56 confirmed cases. 36 of the possible causes were linked to this outbreak, and 4 deaths were reported amongst the confirmed cases. Again, if we look at some of the stats, 70% had a serious underlying medical condition. 25% had a condition where they're on treatment that was likely to result in immune compromisation. 16% were diabetic. 79% were reported to be current smokers, compared with the 19% average across all the Lothian population. And 9% were reported to have excess alcohol consumption based on clinical assessments of consumption of greater than 21 units per week for males and 14 units for females. Yeah. Legionella has been around for over the 40 years. We know that other waterborne pathogens are emerging, like Pseudomonas aeruginosa, easy enough for me to say, in augmented cares. And we've also got Cupraviridis, which again is affecting our immune compromised patients. But we need to understand why this is happening. So let's now consider immune compromised patients. We've got augmented care settings, and this is really more around our Pseudomonas aeruginosa. HTM-041, which is the Healthcare Technical Memorandum, details those that are in augmented care are more susceptible. There is no fixed definition of augmented care. It's just those that are classed as a slightly higher risk area. So that would be our neonate units, our intensive care units for adults and children, oncology units. The list is quite long. We've got renal, respiratory, cystic fibrosis. So it's a relatively long list within a hospital arena. Most care that's designated as augmented would be that where medical nurse procedures render the patient susceptible to invasive disease from the environment and opportunistic pathogens such as our Pseudomonas and other alert pathogens. So we can see on the screen there, which is a snippet from the HTM-041 addendum for Pseudomonas. So let's move on another stage. So another report from Public Health England on their Pseudomonas aeruginosa bacteria. The latest updated report was 2020 and had the data extracted on the 23rd of June. So the data was reported from 146 acute NHS trusts and 191 CCGs. So the annual counts rates being 2017 to 2018, we had 4,305, 1819, 4,186, 19 to 20, 4,336. So we can see there's a steady incline in cases in England. Just consider the 2 types of waterborne pathogens, Legionella and Pseudomonas. We can already determine those susceptible pathogens and how they could be infected. And as a note at the beginning, 30% of ICU patients will pick up a HAI at some point in their hospital stay. So how does it get around? How does it transmit? So the transmission, we'll look at now. So how do people come in contact with these pathogens? Pathogens need to be transmitted, and the 2011 World Health Organization report issued the following transmission pathways. We've got ingestion, inhalation, aspiration, and contact. So quite a strange one in contact. Skin, mucous membranes is probably the least transmittable route. The most transmittable route would be around the inhalation and aspiration of aerosols, because that's a direct pathway to our lungs for Legionella. However, with the contact, that's more of a transmission route for our Pseudomonas. So, HTMO 401 Part C provides a steer on transmission and contact for Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So the first being direct contact, so ingestion, bathing, contact with mucous membranes or surgical sites, splashing from water basins when the outlet is run. So you can see there we've got a shower with a shower head where it's not detached, where it is detached from the holder. You can touch the floor. We've got bacteria on the floor, potentially Pseudomonas. Ingestion via drinking contaminated water from contaminated source or outlet, and splashing. You can see there where there's a infrared dye. We put it under UV, and you can actually see the splash zone from the water. Not a great setup for the tap and the drain, because the spout of the tap goes directly into the drain, which then splashes any bacteria from the drain back up around the room. Yeah, the splashing element is a real hot topic in the NHS currently, with many studies being taken. With splashing, what is in the drain or in the tap travels through the air, land outside the basin, air it onto the person, be it staff, patient, visitor. We all have contact. There's a document out now currently called the NETB 2024-3. And this states we should have a 2-meter zone between any outlet and any patient surface. Another thing to think about is, when we're carrying a bag around a site or a hospital, if we put our handbag, carrier bags, rucksack or anything on the floor, at any point in our journey through the site, we can then pick that back up. We can even put it back onto a patient surface. We're going to visit a friend or a relative in a room. We pop the bag on the bed or the chair or their table where they have the food from. We're transmitting bacteria around the site that way as well. We need to think about how we react with these. The second is being an indirect contact, so inhalation of aerosols within the room, inhalation of aerosols from respiratory equipment, devices that produce an aerosol, or opening, suctioning of wound irrigation, medical devices, equipment rinsed in contaminated water, hand washing in contaminated water. So if we've got a contaminated outlet or water source, and we're utilising that to wash our hands, again, we can transmit around. Reusable wash bowls. If we've just washed a patient who's got a Pseudomonas or another infection, we've not disinfected the bowl properly afterwards, we then use it on another patient. It then becomes a bit of a headache for everybody. And then retrograde contamination, where we've got a patient as a carrier. So from the outlet to the person, to the person, to the room, to the room, to the room, to the room. So we've also got that to look at as well. We have plumbers, maintenance persons on sites, the cleanliness of their tools. We may have just unblocked a sink with a set of tools, then we're going to go and fit a new tap with another set. How do we maintain the cleanliness of tools? What's the processes in place for this? There should be a standard operation procedure in place to make sure that any tools being used on the system are fit for use and clean. So the final part of the slide is the presence of organisms in a hospital environment. This is the final chain or the link of the infection. So we saw a slide a few moments ago from the World Health Organization in 2011. We can now see the rest of the detail being those pathogens present. Bacteria such as E. coli, Legionella, Mycobacterium. Since 2011, we've had quite a few more. Pseudomonas from 2012, which was the first outbreak in Belfast, where several neonates died from contamination with Pseudomonas from contaminated outlets and water. And then we've got Cupaviridis, which in recent years from the QEUH in Glasgow, which is still on an ongoing a trial for the trust there or the health board. So, little background into Cooper Bardus in Glasgow at the QEUH. It opened in June 2015. There was very early concerns about infections emerging in the patients. An inquiry was commissioned, and the first report was published in June 2020. The inquiry is still ongoing. There has been some information shared recently where some of the families of the patients are starting to look at the end of their process with the trust through the legal chains. But some of the findings from the 227 page report, where there are 63 recommendations, are governance of the project during the design, build, commissioning, and maintenance did not adequately take into account the scale of complexity of the specialist nature of the building product and project. QH project would have benefited from greater external expertise, greater uptake of internally available expertise to support decision making on the water and air and ventilation systems at key points in the building. Some difficulties encountered with the water ventilation systems were a result of ambiguity concerning the status and interpretation of guidance. Yeah, one of the things the industry hold and the take hold of, and the water hygiene centre being part of this, is the vigorous interpretation reviews of designs. This goes back to for a number of years. So if we start the design, looking at it early, making sure that everything is fit for purpose, everything is in line, we can actually hopefully try and reduce some of these issues in the future. Today's build can be tomorrow's waterborne pathogen issue. So let's get today's build right so we don't have an issue tomorrow. We need to have things like project water safety groups, project design groups, a project water safety plan. All of these key elements help for a safer build and design of a property, right the way from conception to handover to being utilised and occupied. So, organisms naturally in our environment. They fall under COSH, so control of substances hazardous to health. And this looks firstly eliminating how these substances are hazardous to our health. So how do we remove these, our flora and fauna? How do we remove them from existing installations, that are potentially contaminated? It cannot always be achievable. So to comply with COSH, we need to eliminate or control. So as such, to comply, we need to control these substances that are hazardous to health. Because we can't eliminate, we're going to go back to the control. So from a hierarchy of control, we must try and engineer to remove or reduce the risks, then look at how we control and manage the risk moving forwards. If asking, what is to do, we need to do a Legionella risk assessment or waterborne pathogen risk assessment. Have a management plan in place. Explain to all parties what's happening to keep our records up to date. We need to make sure we've got trained and competent persons working on and with our systems. It's very important that everybody in the process is part of any decision making. And they're actually trained and competent to the right level. So now let's think about these microorganisms and where they may be present. So they're in our reservoir of organisms. So let's start at the beginning. We've got our reservoirs, where our water source comes from. It's not sent to us as sterile water. It's sent to us as chlorinated water. So it's in its best quality that it can be. However, we get mains breakages in footpaths and roads. It can suck in dirt and debris, that contains bacteria. We then get contamination. A very potential source for microorganisms to be present. And also, let's think back. When was the last time we opened our water bill? Because bacteria and organisms are naturally occurring because they're ubiquitous and they're found in rivers and streams. We open our water bill. Where do we see waterborne bacteria free of charge being part of the bill? We don't, but they're there. We need the right conditions for them to grow and proliferate in our buildings. So we get to our buildings. Our mains cold water enters the properties. Once inside our properties, it's our responsibility to manage the water and the systems to prevent the proliferation of microorganisms. So, what might we have within our buildings? We might have a cold water storage tank, as you can see at the top of the photo there. We may have hot water generation systems, so whether it be a point of use, a combi boiler, a hot water cylinder, or a very large clarifier or plate heat exchangers. And then we have a distribution system where this water is circulated around. It can be quite complex. So, presence of the systems here, we have some issues. A few examples of what may exist: cold water storage tanks, oversized, poor turnover, lack of access, poorly configured, gaining heat. You can see a photo there where we've got the tank underneath a skylight. Hot water generators, undersized, so not achieving temperatures, not set at the right temperatures, being poorly configured. Distribution systems, you can see there, bottom middle, where we've got capped off ends. Those capped off ends can be going back to a source. That source then can be circulating around the building. We could be circulating bacteria around the building. You can see the top middle, we've got unfortunately, a deceased bird that's tried to do backstroke in one of our cold water storage tanks. Another source of contamination, that would probably be more of an E. coli and coliform issue. Right-hand side photos, we can see on the top, discoloured water. That tap may not have been used for some time. Someone's come to open it and we're pulling through dirt, debris and potential some bacterium. And on the bottom right, this is quite a typical photo of things that we find when we're out on site. A room that's been used as a storeroom. We've got a bath that we can't get to very easily. We've got a hand basin we can't get to very easily. How are we flushing these outlets? It's not always easy to make sure we're keeping our water turning over. Again, we look back at design. Let's get to the outlet. A few examples that may exist in the outlet. Pseudomonas aeruginosa is more around being in the outlet and the locus of the outlet vicinity than in the water system. If we look at the photos, at the top one, we've got a thermostatic mixing tap that has a thermostatic mixing valve connected to it. So we're almost double blending the water. So this means we've got a greater opportunity for water to be sitting at between 35 and 41 degrees, which is the ideal growing temperature for bacterium. Drains where the outlet is partially blocked, water does not freely flow down. We can get contamination back out the drain, back into the basin. When our cleaners come along, we can spread that bacterium around the building or around the basin. Strainers, you can see on the top there, they become contaminated. They get full of dirt and debris from the system. These aren't inspected and cleaned. Bacteria builds up there and it comes out of our outlet. Non-RAS approved materials being used on the system. These are materials that are more likely to grow bacterium. We shouldn't really be using these on our water systems. We should be utilizing something that's RAS approved, fit for purpose. It's clean, it's fresh, we can keep the water moving through it. And as you can see from a couple of the photos, we've got some nice biofilms that are being built up. So, We have a few more lovely photos here. Flow straighteners in taps. You can see some nice scale debris biofilms built up there. Yeah, there's a great area for bacteria to breed. Uh, Shower head that's not been particularly looked after well. And these plastic inserts that are in our taps and facilities are actually made up of several layers of plastic of differential apertures. So you can see that that's where we can actually get cases of bacteria building up. It's just going to grow up in those, and then it'll come out eventually once the ecological growth has happened. And that's going to give us a bit of a headache. So over the last few slides, we've shared examples of reservoirs where microorganisms grow. There are many more for sure. This isn't an exhaustive list. This was just some examples. So now let's think about the reservoir from the human factors perspective. Yeah, that being said, that the reservoir of organisms come to be, these human factors cover those persons that may have an impact on the water system. So designers, builders, maintainers, cleaners, healthcare workers, patients, everyone has a place to play within this and how it all works. So let's look at it in more detail. Yeah. So what do our designers and builders introduce? Clinical hospital hand wash basins being used as urinal during, you know, the build where there's been no toilets or water on. We've actually seen hand wash basins being used as a urinal. You can see there the photo, yellow staining and yellow droplets. Yeah, that's resulted in quite a high risk for our commissioning of the water system. Components not kept in sealed bags or covered. Yeah, our domestic hot water systems not installed to the specific detail. We've got a recent example of where the client had asked for all hot water returns to be within 300 mil of the outlet. 150 of these outlets did not comply to this. So the design wasn't being followed. We need people out on the field when these builds are happening, making sure that what's happening out on site is as the design. Yeah, we've got poor control of our contractors and materials, poor control of the installation, no awareness of impact on the components that can have an inherent risk at the end of the install. So, what are some human factors for maintenance and cleaners that can introduce? Incorrect components being used, poor installation of components, poor storage of materials, incorrect processes. Examples include strainers not being cleaned, built for biofilm and bacteria. You think of those strainers and filters a few slides ago. Dirty tools and components being used, contamination from other sources. Again, from early in the presentation, we spoke around that. Wash basins, wash on basins being used to store dirty mop heads. Or the classic one, you walk into a sluice room, cleaner's room, you find cloths and mops hung over the taps. Nice warm environment for bacteria to colonize in. What's on the floor is now on your taps. Yeah, and then how we clean our outlets. Cleaners starting with or domestic services clean their facilities. Start at the drain, work around the basin, then to the tap without following the actual cleaning standards. I did some audits once, watched a housekeeping personnel do their standard cleaning. I witnessed them start at the bottle trap at the base of the hand basin, worked up from the bottle trap, around the hand basin on the external, around the paneling behind the taps, down to the hand basin, and finalized at the tap. The scary thing is that the cloth they were used never got turned once, and they just spread bacteria all around the area and then ended up basically contaminating the outlet. Yeah, we should work top to bottom and always have a fresh water for cloth or a fresh cloth, preferably a disposable one, but cleaning our taps as the last facility. So, we've got some more factors from healthcare staff and patients that can be introduced. Incorrect use of the outlet or no use of the outlet. We've got hoists and things there where we can't get to the assisted bathing facility to flush the shower or the taps. Then in the other photo, the hand basin's actually being utilised to store medical items. You know, it's not a great setup. We shouldn't be doing that. A hand basin is for washing hands. It's not for pouring leftover tea, coffee, juice down. We've got dirty utilities for those. It is just purely for hand basin. So again, over the last few slides, we've shared examples of human factors that can impact on the reservoir and organisms. Again, there's going to be very many more that we could share with you, as this isn't an exhaustive list. So this concludes the presentation. Let's bring it home and take away some points. So we've got our immune compromised patients. Okay, so patients who hospitals contain patients who are susceptible to infection. Our patients are exposed to microorganisms via inhalation, aspiration, contact, and ingestion. And then microorganisms are occurring naturally. We're not going to eliminate them, we've got to control them. So a combination of favourable conditions exists for their proliferation. Controlling these favourable conditions will reduce the infection. Things like keep our water the right temperature, keep it moving, keep it clean is a bit of a mantra that we use within the industry. So there are resources and learning here where we have, through the presentation, we've made references to things. Here are some links to some of the documentations we've referenced and where further information can be found. Finally, thank you for listening. We issue a weekly blog on social media or through our website. Also, we have academy videos covering topics such as temperature monitoring, sampling, flushing little used outlets, along with a recording of any previous briefing sessions like this one or for one of other topics. We typically do about 3 blogs per month. I know it's not been the most exciting subject for everybody today, but it's something to keep everyone safe. Everyone comes in touch with water every day. So again, thank you for listening, and I'll hand you back over to Kieran.
Thank you very much, Jim. I will maybe counter that, saying the turnout today would suggest that it's a very interesting and high-profile topic. So thank you very much. I certainly learned a lot from that session. I think the thing about water coming from the tap is we all kind of take for granted. Of course, it's clean water. But how could we possibly know without actually testing and getting some expert advice? Some of the images you showed there of kind of dirty, contaminated internal pipework and things like that. An average person could possibly know that without actually getting some expert advice in and actually sampling the water maybe and doing some further tests if needed and things like that. So that's where your expertise is invaluable, because you're seeing these things every day and you know good practice from bad practice and things like that. So I certainly found it incredibly interesting, and we've huge number of people stayed throughout, so I think they found it fascinating too. Two particular stats were interesting for me. Um, I saw you mentioned at the beginning that the European Centre for Disease mentioned over 4 million cases of healthcare associated infections each year, which is a staggering number. Um, I found it really interesting actually that men are 3 times more likely to get Legionella. I think it said, and I was just wondering, is there any reason for that? Is it job? Is it biology? Is it what is there any is
There's a
there is
few myths behind it.
yeah, yeah. It's more of
Typically,
a myth though, is it? Or yeah,
in recent cases, men have been more inclined to contract it, but it could be down to industry of working. Males also have a slightly larger lung capacity, um, and also the female population have got a slightly better immune system than a male for some reason. So again, there was that stat of a female's immune system is 0.4% stronger than the male's. Um, Industry-wise now, it's becoming very much more a 50-50 of females working within engineering or heavy engineering, whereas traditionally back in the days, the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, it was more of a male-dominated area of
yes, of
work.
course, yeah.
Whereas now it is very much, I would say it's almost a good 50-50.
Okay, that's good to know. It's not just down to genetics or anything. So that should be
No.
okay. I think there are some comments and questions in here. Um, Donna asked, are the slides from the presentation available for attendees? I know the recording of the session will be available anyway, and I'm sure if you reach out to Sarah or Jim, they may be able to send something on directly to you, Donna. But the recording will be uh, uploaded to the WRSM website straight after, which will be very helpful. WRSM can't issue the slides directly, but as I say, the Water Hygiene Centre may be able to do so. Um, Charles asks, is there any new technology or equipment on the market that is helping to control these issues?
There is. You can have secondary dosing systems on your water systems. You can have things like chlorine dioxide, chlorine, silver, copper dosing systems. They help with the control method. But again, if you're not flushing your outlets, the secondary control method's not going to get there. So it's horses for courses. Realistically, if we can keep the outlets clean, keep the water flowing, keep the water the right temperature, keep the water clean, that's the best mechanism.
Good maintenance and preventative measures.
Yes.
Yeah.
Make sure we're doing everything we can to encourage the correct movement of water through a building and don't over engineer it. If you only need 1,000 litres of water in a building, why put 5,000 in? Always comes back to design. Or if you've got 5,000 litres of water for the building when it opened 20 years ago, the building population has declined, as we've seen over recent years since COVID. The water system's still designed for those 200 people in the building. And actually, we've probably only got 20 to 50 in there now. Has the water system been looked at and redesigned since this? So it's slightly detracted from Charles's question. However, we need to look at what our water system is, what it's doing, how it's being maintained, and does it still meet the design criteria of the population within it? That will then help us with maintaining the building and the water systems moving forwards.
So it's all down to a well-informed risk assessment done by a competent person at the end of the day. And as
Yeah,
I say, the system itself only counts for so much, as you mentioned, it's down to building use and occupancy and things like that as well, and that type of thing as
correct maintenance
well.
procedures.
Pratima asks,
So
Pseudomonas flushing in augmented area, is it applicable to all taps or little used outlet? So is it related to the duration of flushing, or is it more to do with maybe water sitting in taps or anything like that? Or is it
okay, so augmented care settings and pseudomonas flushing, the HTM 0401 states that we should be flushing all these facilities. So that's every tap, toilet, any other equipment connected to the hot and cold water services, that should be flushed daily. Um, and it can be for a period of time or to temperature. So if we're not getting our temperature within 2 to 3 minutes of flushing, we then need to look at how to flush to temperature. And that would really be dictated within the water safety plan for that area. So yes, it should be flushed daily, and it is absolutely every outlet within the facility.
Great. That also answers Pratima's follow-up question about how frequent flushing should be. So it should be at least daily. So thank you. That's
In
preempted a second
augmented
question.
care, it's daily. In other areas within the acute hospital, it's twice a week.
Okay, good to know. Nicola says, thank you for the talk, really interesting. So thank you, Nicola. And Sarah's actually shared a link to a video about flushing, which would be really helpful to attendees. So thank you, Sarah. I think that's all the questions we have. Just going back through scrolling here, I think that covers everything. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much to Jim and Sarah for giving up their time today. Before we depart, I just want to mention to people something. First of all, you can visit the Water Hygiene Centre for all the useful blogs and information. Thank you. We've run a session on this top before, it's been proven to be really popular last year as well. So we will run it again in the future. Just briefly before we let you go, we ran a session in January with a consultant called Andy Barker, and we had sound quality issues there with his session. We did promise we would try to rerun that session. So actually that session is going to be rerun by the Northeast and Cumbria branch on the 29th of June at 1 p.m. So if anyone caught that session in January with Andy and experienced those sound quality issues, you can re catch that session. So we will share that to our branch page anyway, because we're sorry about the sound issues in January, but hopefully that'll set it right. Any final words from you, Jim or Sarah, on the topic, how people can reach out to you and get some support and advice and things like that?
All I was
You
going
want
to
to go,
say,
sir?
yeah, no, all I was going to say is thank you, Kieran, for highlighting the message I've just popped in the chat. The blogs that our senior consultants, so like Jim himself, he also writes them. They act as authorizing engineers for our clients. So the blogs are technical. I can't take credit for them. I just have the job of making them look pretty and sending them out. But they cover a whole range of topics, from flushing little used outlets, temperature monitoring, how to manage dead legs, blind ends. Some of them are quite niche, and some of them are more generic, but they are super helpful. And we've had lots of good feedback. They're completely free to subscribe to. I popped the link in the chat there, so if you just click on that link, you can just enter your details, and you'll then receive the regular blogs from us.
Thanks, Sarah. And if anyone is looking for support from your company, is it throughout Great Britain? Is it throughout the UK, or what's the reach there? If anyone is looking for support, is it England or is it all over?
Yep.
Or what's the...
So we cover the whole of the UK. So we have a risk assessment team, and we also have senior consultants that have clients right up from down from the Channel Islands right up to Shetland and Orkney Islands. So we cover pretty much the length and breadth of the UK.
Well done, impressive. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us. As I say, we'll send that link up to the branch page. And thank you for joining us today. And thank you to Sarah and Jim for giving up their time.
No problem.
Thank you
In
for your
fact,
time.
Kieran, just before you go, I've just
Yep.
noticed another message that's come in from
Oh, sorry,
Pratima
great. Well done.
about thermostatic mixing taps. We actually do have a blog on TMTs. I will just pop that quickly in the chat. That hopefully then will give you a little bit more information.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, they can reach out to you directly.
Yeah, by more means they can do.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much. Thank you for joining us today. Have a good day.